So this case, Carlill versus Carbolic Smokeball Company, comes to us from the year 1893 from the UK. So this is not an American case, it is a case from Britain. And the case was published during the outbreak of a pandemic known as the Russian flu. And what happened was during this flu, this company, the Carbolic Smokeball Company, had released a product that was a ball, and inside the ball was carbolic acid. And apparently this acid would vaporize and smoke, and then you were supposed to inhale the carbolic acid vapors. And supposedly, by inhaling the vapors of this carbolic acid, which I'm sure was very safe and clinically effective, you could prevent yourself from becoming infected with the Russian flu. And the owner of this company, the Carbolic Smokeball Company, was so confident in his product that he released this advertisement. So, 100-pound reward, which was apparently a lot of money back in 1893, will be paid by the Carbolic Smokeball Company to any person who contracts influenza after using the carbolic smoke ball according to the printed directions. And then they even go on to say that if they are depositing £1,000 into the bank just to show that they are serious. And then they end with this claim that no person who has taken this product has ever contracted influenza. Now, predictably, a person named Mrs. Carlill saw this advertisement and purchased herself one carbolic smoke ball. She used it as directed, and as fate would have it, she contracted influenza. And for most people, they probably would have concluded that the ball was a scam and threw it in the garbage and forgot about the whole incident. But unfortunately for the Carbolic Smoke Ball Company, Mrs. Carlill's husband was an attorney, and so he wrote a letter demanding payment of the 100-pound reward. And the Carbolic Smoke Ball Company responded that in order to collect the reward, a person had to use the product in the presence of company monitors to ensure that it was being used properly. And Mr. Carlill responded, "That wasn't in your advertisement. I am suing," and took them to court. And so the case came before the British Court of the Queen's Bench. And Mrs. Carlill argued that the advertisement was a contract offer and that she had accepted that offer and now she wanted payment. And the Carbolic Smokeball Company responded with the tried and true defense, "What? I was joking." And in legal terms, they asserted that the claim was mere puffery. And the term puffery is sort of this term that we apply to certain claims about products that are not to be taken seriously, so insincere. And typically, these claims are also hyperbolic. So often over the top, outlandish, not meant to be taken seriously. And so, for example, I when I was younger, my family had a foreign exchange student, and she was from a country that was formerly Soviet Union. So she was not used to American consumer culture and advertisements, and she ended up seeing a trailer for an upcoming movie that claimed that the movie was the number one movie in America. And she immediately freaked out and told everyone that we had to go see this movie because it was the number one movie in America. And we had to explain to her that, that wasn't really a claim that meant anything, and that every trailer for every movie made in America says that it's the number one movie in America. And so that is what a court would likely call puffery, that it's a claim that doesn't mean anything. But I think that that incident really shows just how much work this concept of puffery does in terms of defending against claims of misleading advertisements. Because it is kind of weird that every movie that gets made can just claim to be the number one movie in America, and that doesn't have to be based on any sort of objective fact, and it's just up to the consumer to realize it's a meaningless claim. But I think as this case shows, in 1893, as it is today, a company can get away with making a lot of claims that seem to be based on some sort of objective fact by just claiming that it's all puffery. The Carbolic Smoke Company also raised a defense that this was a naked promise, which would be unenforceable, like, for instance, what we would call a conditional gift. And so the idea of this, and I won't talk about it too much because it's getting into this concept of consideration, but a naked promise is a promise that lacks consideration, and so it doesn't have the elements of a contract. But the basic idea of consideration is that before a court is going to hold someone to a promise, you have to show that you have paid something for that promise. Because if you haven't paid for the benefit of the promise, then you are not entitled to that benefit. And so, one example of a naked promise is something called a conditional gift. And a conditional gift can kind of look like a person is paying for a promise, but they're really not. And so the example would be if I call my friend and tell them, hey, I have a treadmill at my house. If you want it, just come over and take it off my hands. And then if my friend drives over to my house and I change my mind and decide that I want to keep the treadmill, my friend is probably not going to be able to enforce that promise that I gave him as a matter of contract law because he didn't pay me anything for it. I was just offering to give him a gift. But my friend may argue that he actually did pay something for the treadmill because he drove over to my house to come pick it up. And he could argue that, that was him doing work and that I received the benefit of seeing him come to my house, and that therefore he had paid something, and so he's entitled to the benefit that I promised. But in general, courts don't go for that because that work that he did in coming over to my house to pick up the gift didn't really benefit me in any material way. It was just something that was necessary for him to do to come pick up the gift. And so that is basically what the Carbolic Smokeball Company argues. So they say, look, these were two transactions. So in the first transaction, you have Mrs. Carlill, and she pays 10 shillings to the Carbolic Smokeball Company. In exchange for that 10 shillings, the Carbolic Smokeball Company gave her a smoke ball. And that was the first transaction. And then the second transaction is the Carbolic Smokeball Company promising to pay 100 pounds, promising to pay 100 pounds to Mrs. Carlill if she contracted influenza. But they point out, what did Mrs. Carlill pay in order to get this benefit of 100 pounds? Because she didn't give us anything to essentially give her this insurance policy. So therefore, this is just a conditional promise. And so Mrs. Carlill, of course, argued, well, I used your product. Well, I used your product like you wanted me to, and it didn't work, and so I should get the 100 pounds that you promised. And the Carbolic Smokeball Company responds, yeah, you did use it, but we didn't get any benefit from you using it. That was just a condition of us gifting you 100 pounds. And so if we decide that we don't want to give you that gift anymore, that's just up to us. But the court ends up rejecting this argument, and they say that indeed using the smoke ball was a benefit to the Carbolic Smokeball Company because their advertisement was intended to get people to use their product, which would in turn mean that they got to sell more products. And so the whole goal of the promise was to induce people to buy the product. So when they did, that was a benefit to the company. And as for this, and so this argument about the naked promise gets dismissed, and then this argument about puffery also gets dismissed because the court says, look, you say that it was just puffery and insincere, but you can see in the advertisement, you say that 1,000 pounds was deposited in the bank just to show our sincerity in the matter. Sincerity. So you can't argue that it was an insincere promise, that no one could have taken it seriously, when you're actively trying to show people that you are taking it seriously. And so this is how the court looks at this case. So the court says that this case is like a reward poster. And so when you go out in the world and you see a poster that says lost dog and then reward $500 and have a little dog. So when you go out in the world and you see a reward poster for a dog, if you go and find the dog and take it back to the owner, that owner is now on the hook to give you that $500 reward. And what the court says about this is that this is a public offer, and it is accepted by performance. And this idea of being accepted by performance is also known as a unilateral contract. And notice this is a little bit different than a contract that you're usually used to seeing, which is, for instance, one person. So in a normal bilateral contract, this person promises, say, they'll pay $1,000. And the other person promises that they will, say, build a house. And in this case, we wouldn't consider this a unilateral contract. If this person doesn't start building the house, he would be in breach of contract. And now this person can sue him, even if he hasn't even started building it. He can sue him for basically what would be the difference in cost that it would take to hire someone who can build it. So this is what we would call a bilateral contract. So it's an exchange of promises, and it is enforceable. No one has to do anything for this contract to be enforced. Okay, but this is different. In a unilateral contract, with this example of a reward for a lost dog, you're making the offer of $500, and some member of the public decides that they want to take you up on that offer. If they don't find the dog, let's say they don't find this dog, you're not going to be able to sue this person for not finding your dog. Now, it might be different if you like contracted with some specific person to, a professional dog bounty hunter. If you specifically contracted them to go find a dog, and then they didn't find the dog, then maybe you could sue them for breach of contract. But in the case of a reward poster where you're just making a public offer, someone who decides that they want to take you up on that offer, starts searching for the dog, and then doesn't find them, they're not liable to you for anything because you don't have a contract yet. Because in a unilateral contract, you can only accept it by performance. So the contract doesn't really form until they find the dog. So until they find the dog, there is no contract. So if this person doesn't find my dog, he's not liable to me, nor am I liable to him for the $500. It's only once the dog is found that then the contract is accepted by performance and it becomes enforceable. Now, the Carbolic Smokeball Company does have a response to this argument, and they say, look, this isn't quite the same thing as a reward poster for a lost dog, because in this situation where I put up a reward for $500 for someone to find my lost dog, I can pretty well expect that only one person is going to take me up on that offer and return the dog, and so I will only have to pay $500. So this is a limited liability situation. So in this situation, I have limited liability. I'm only on the hook for the $500 reward, and it would be impossible for multiple people to validly claim this reward. But in the case of the Carbolic Smokeball Company's advertisement, there is really no limit to the number of people who could claim this reward, and they are essentially on the hook to pay £100 for every person who has bought this product. But even more than that, their advertisement doesn't even say that you have to buy it, you just have to use it. So in that instance, anyone who uses the product, whether or not they bought it, would potentially have a claim for £100 if they contract the flu. And the court basically responds to this and says that, well, that's your fault for writing the offer like that. You decided to put out an offer that you'll give £100 for any person to use this product. And then the owner of the Carbolic Smokeball Company makes one final plea and basically, lets the court know that his company was not set up as a corporation. It's a sole proprietorship. So this guy is personally liable for all of the company's debts. And if the court says that this is an enforceable contract, he is potentially going to be in financial ruin. But sadly, the court doesn't care about this argument and rules against him anyway. And so you might be wondering, whatever happened to this owner of the Carbolic Smokeball Company? Did this case cause him to go bankrupt? And the answer is actually no, because only two other people ended up claiming this £100 reward. And so he ended up just issuing a new advertisement, doubling down on the claim, and now offering a £200 reward, and also claiming that the fact that only three people had claimed the £100 reward was conclusive proof that this thing worked. And so I suppose you could argue that this case had a happy ending for all of the parties involved. But as we are thinking about this case of the carbolic smoke ball, I want you to think about how it applies to other advertisement situations. And specifically, the incident that I was thinking about was this advertising campaign in the early 2000s called the Special K Challenge. And in this challenge, this cereal brand called Special K challenged people to eat their cereal for 2 meals per day for 14 days and then told them that they could lose up to 6 pounds. Now, evidently, there was nothing in Special K cereal that was particularly conducive to weight loss. And essentially, the reason why some participants lost weight appears to just be the fact that they were eating less calories, which could have been done with any food product. But in any case, I want you to think about whether a person might be able to rely on the rule announced in the carbolic smoke ball case to argue that Special K was in breach of its contract if the person took up this challenge but then didn't lose 6 pounds. Might the person be able to argue that Special K was somehow liable to them?